Japan 4, Canada 0. I mean, growing in confidence is one thing. I guess we're back to earth. I don't know. Even with the result, we still kind of control our destiny, which is the interesting thing, thanks to Tanzania's win over France. But yeah, a 4-0 loss to Japan. There's a few things to talk about on a very, very side note, but somewhat related. We need a domestic league, okay? We're not denying that. However, there's also a reality that there's more than just that, right? We can't just be, oh, we're not succeeding because we don't have a domestic league. Well, is that the issue itself? It's a big component. Yes, there's no doubt about that. But again, there's just so many things with this. And I find it a little bit, I don't think it's a fair paint all, brush over everything, this solves everything. Because in building a domestic league, even if they do get a domestic league, right, are they going to build it with academies right off the bat, or are they going to go, we're just going to have teams and they go from academies from that standpoint? Which means then, where's the youth development coming? You have professional development, but you don't have youth development. And even if you do add academies, where are they going to play? They're more likely going to play where most of these U17s did play, which was in League Ones, right? I understand the need for it, and I'm not diminishing it. We've needed one since pick a year between 2012 and 2022. That's when we needed the domestic league. That being said, that cannot be the default answer to whenever something in the women's teams, and especially at the youth level, doesn't go right. Youth tournaments are snapshots of what your program is currently. It's no guarantee of success, nor is it a guarantee of failure. It just means at this moment we've hit alt print screen, and this is how this plays against another team. The better question, it's not just a league, it's how we're actually developing players, which is the interesting thing, right? Because against Japan, pressure ate us alive. And if you watched the CONCACAF U17s, which I did, pressure was their Achilles heel, which was interesting, right? The game I always reference is the the game against Honduras, where Honduras comes out and pressures them, and then they go up a goal, and Canada makes some adjustments and they pressure them, Honduras that is, Canada pressures Honduras, and then they get back in the game and they win the game 4-1. But pressure has been something that is interesting, that has always caused this team trouble. Now, is that a conversation based off the type of players we're developing? Are we just taking athletes and trying to give them skills? Are we trying to get the most skilled football players? And then if some of them are athletes, that's great, and then developing that way. Those are questions. I think every time we talk about youth development, that should be the question. Because there's so many things, and I could go on a rant about youth teams and what the proper things are. Because if I'm really going to go there, even if we have a league, there are still issues. The league doesn't solve our problem because in terms of squad selection, 90% of our teams come from national development centers, which is a great thing that they're able to identify them. But that also means if you aren't in an NDC, odds are you're not playing for the national team, or the pathway is so much more difficult. Whereas, and that's the question, are you actually doing a good job at identifying players? Or do you identify a core set of players and say, this is the core that we're going to select from? Right, if you look at the women's national team as itself, Evelyn Vienne, Chloe Lacasse. Those are the players who haven't played. That's crazy, but those are the players who haven't played any youth football for Canada. Everyone else is a graduate, which is both an amazing accomplishment, but also an indictment of how we select players. That is the bigger question. That being said, against Japan, there's two questions with the Japan game for me. First one is, Japan is clearly at another tier, and it comes to the question, it comes to the point of, there are teams based off how Canada stylistically plays. In CONCACAF, Canada's style was, even if we're having a bad game, our fitness level is such that we can just press you, and we'll turn you over, and then we'll create opportunities. Against Japan, the press was disjointed, right? The forward line would press, but then the midfielders would sit back so deep that once they cross that, next thing you know, they have all the space to attack, and then you have, 7 players who are sitting back there saying, we're not going to let you pass through us, and Japan just said, cool, we'll just hit long shots. And that's how they were scoring their goals. Long shots, and then a few cuts inside. that was a concern. And especially, like, the press was disjointed. And from the midfield, and I don't know if that to me is a coaching directive, because if the forward line is moving up, but then the midfielders aren't, then you're leaving that gap to be exposed, right? And I think that's a conversation with Emma Humphries where we have to figure that out. Because if both lines aren't moving in unity, then you're leaving yourself exposed for gaps and you don't know how to deal with it. Canada right now has felt like a team where they've had opportunities to play together, that their style is essentially established, right? They'll play from the back, they'll try to go down the wings, and then see what they can create from there. Midfield on occasion. And today was a game where, man, they needed a midfield because Japan took away the sides. Whenever Canada would play out from the back, there was pressure coming in to the center backs as well as the fullbacks, making them come out like they were better off just booting the ball and hoping a header is able to go through, which isn't Canada's style. Canada plays from the back, tries to build up, and then find your wings and get the ball inside. And so with that being the case, that wasn't really working. I mean, going into this tournament, the midfield was the question. And in this game, the midfield was a little bit non-existent. When they started to push up to be in the play, that's where it was. And against a team like Japan, if you're going to press, you need your midfielders to be part of that as well. You can't just let your forward line to do that because they are adequate enough and good enough to pass around you, right? And I think that's what we see with this style of play, right? The style of play, which is like this Canadian style or the American early 90s, the 2000s style of just being able to press, create turnovers, and just go on the counter and score goals. You beat that with technical players, right? Technical ability is a great equalizer, and the book's been out on that for a while. And unless you actually start to address that and get players who can pass out of those pressure situations, or have players who are good holding up, you're going to find yourself in situations where you're trying to pass, you're trying to build out, and then you either need a moment of brilliance, right? A moment of individual brilliance, right? And prime example of that, if you look at the U20s, Jada Rose would do this on occasion, right? After a while, they'd be passing, she'd take the ball, and then you start to advance, get through, pass the ball through. No forward to get across with. She did this on the senior team against Australia. That's what happens when you're not able to build that out. And I think for Canada, man, this was a little bit exposed. And I think the conversation is, yes, domestically we always need that, but the conversation is, how are we actually developing our players here? Because if they can't play, and that's the funny thing is, it's sounding negative, but they win against Tanzania and France, more than likely loses to Japan. They're in the next round. So, like, as dire as this sounds, they're still fine. They are still fine. But it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we build out from that? Of note, Annabelle Shihu still on 1 yellow. So that's something to watch against Tanzania on Tuesday. Emma Humphries didn't take off Amanda Allen. I felt that once the game was 3-0, let her rest. Because she's essentially just played 2 games. And you're either going to rest her and bring her off the bench for this third matchup, or you're going to play her for a third matchup. And that's 90 minutes, 270 minutes in the heat. At CONCACAF W, we're a little bit better with our rotations and keeping players fresh. But here, it just feels like they're just going with their best lineups all throughout. And hey, you want them to do that, but at the same time, when you gain a result, you need the players for this result. And this game was not in question. Like, Japan was doing its best. Once Japan got to 3, that's when Canada started to bring their midfielders up and then start to pressure, and the game looked better for Canada. But at that point, you could have just taken her off. Maybe take off Ella Ati as well. Let her rest up for the Tanzania game. Okiki came on. There's a lot of things going on. But yeah, I just don't know if Humphries had the best run of managing her players in this game, especially for where it was. But pressure's a thing, and it's a little bit of a concern seeing how they've played 3 games in Europe. They played Mexico twice before CONCACAF W. They played a Revelations Cup. They've played the CONCACAF W, all these players played at League One levels. Most of these players played at the Canada Summer Games, and then they're here. So in terms of match rustness or just familiarity with some of their teammates, most of them had teammates on different teams that they played with, and their match fitness should be there. So maybe that's why Coach Humphries isn't subbing them off, but still, their fate is in their hands. So what's at stake? Tuesday basically is win and you're in. We're working on the assumption that Japan will beat France. Japan has got 2 4-0 victories. I think Japan does beat France. And then it comes down to Canada versus Tanzania. And I think Canada will look better against Tanzania because Tanzania will sit back and try to counter. However, if they're going to sit back, that allows Canada to actually build up and look better. So more than likely, Canada will look better coming off on the wings, cutting in, and trying to set balls inside. And I think that they will get the result against Tanzania. But again, you got to win it on the pitch first. And that is kind of where it is. So Tuesday, that's the game. But guys, how do you feel about this game? There are a few positives. Coralie Lallier, I mean, what else can you do? She technically saved that penalty. I'm counting that as a save. And then saying that it didn't go. And the flag went up. Anyways, the goalie was the best player for Canada. Annabelle Chikwu came in, and she's young. Chikwu has Olivia Smith vibes, where she's on the pitch, and not to say that's how she's playing, but she's on the pitch and putting everything on frame, which, I mean, on this team isn't bad, especially since you're missing Rosa Malouf. But there are times where when she has the ball in on a run, if she lifts her head, she'll see a player that's free. But that'll come as she develops and as she comes with age, and hopefully we see that. But guys, let's just wrap it up here. What did you like? How do you feel going into the game? If we need to have a conversation about domestic leagues and preparation things, feel free to do it in the comments. I'll be there. I'm done talking now.